Rob. Welcome to Stream Streak Day 82. That's right, 82 days in a row. I didn't think I'd get here. Or is it 81? Oh no, I forgot. It's all time has blended in. However, it doesn't matter what day it is because I'm joined by my very special guest, who I'm very happy to have here, Mr. Jim Vesal. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good man, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. It's a kind of wet and sunny day here in the UK, which is basically all of our weather system. But yeah, I'm great. How are you? It's super early there. Thank you so much for being up to talk to
Yeah,
us.
it's I don't know what the weather's like because it's still dark out. It's 4 a.m. here, so I'm coming all the way from the West Coast, Vancouver, BC. So yeah, I think it's supposed to rain today actually. So hopefully hopefully it doesn't rain. So but yeah.
How's it? How's lockdown been over there? How have you been coping? You okay?
Yeah, Vancouver's actually been really good. We're actually like of all the like major like Western, quote unquote, Western countries and cities, like major cities, we're actually have some of the lowest cases. I think there's like 27 cases in the whole city, and that's a city of like 4 million people. And they're very isolated. So we're just actually starting to come off lockdown. Like restaurants are starting to open. Obviously, everything's at 50% capacity, so they're not allowed to open fully. But like we're emerging, and obviously there's lots going on in the world right now, and I was actually having a conversation with my cousin, but there was like we had some protests yesterday,
Hmm.
and there was like 5,000 people there. So I'm like, well, I guess it's all over because there's literally just 5,000 people chilling in a giant parade. So like, I don't think anyone cares at this point. It's over. So
Yeah, yeah, I would also agree with that.
yeah,
But good morning. I just want to say good morning to everyone who's joined us live. So Brad Glover, Jabs, Jonah, Cameron, Stufflin, thank you very much for being here. Anyone who's joined us live, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching it from, Twitch specifically, though, you guys are my faves. And also big love to everyone on the podcast. Please stay hydrated. Jim, you're joining us for a very special day today because the podcast has officially hit 1 million downloads as of today, which I'm quite proud of.
congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's quite cool. That's quite cool. And I'm sorry that most of that had to be me talking, so I apologise to all the podcast listeners. Hopefully, it's
I'm
mainly going
sorry
to
for you as well.
be. Yeah. Hopefully, it's just going to be Jim, but that's awesome. Thank you. And also, thank you to everyone on the Oswald Game Patreon. So, today, me and Jim, we're going to get to know Jim, find out a little bit about him, and then
Sure.
we're going to talk demons later. We also will talk about some hot 40k gossip. So, Jim, can you? It's the most boring question ever, but can you just tell me how you got into the hobby? It's the standard one I got to ask.
No, it's a very good question. Uh, so I'm trying to think. So Games Workshop. I don't know if they still do this, but yeah, they used to do like demo games. And so I think so I'm 35 actually. In about 18 hours, I turned 36. So I have my 36th birthday on June 7th. So um,
Big
I
happy
don't know.
birthday! So you got to
Thank
put
you.
4 a.m. just before your
Yeah.
birthday. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Happy birthday! That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm getting becoming an old man, but I think I was probably 12 or 13, and I so I was always into I used to play like D&D with my friends, so I was always into like kind of fantasy gaming, and I always preferred like knights, and I used to read like books on like knights and armor and all that whole thing was very much my jam
Uh,
when I was a kid,
Can
and
I stop you there? You got any favorite books you want to shout out?
as a kid or in general.
Oh, general, yeah. What you digging?
God.
Like,
Right. I mean, there's a few book series. I mean, obviously, I was actually just explaining to my friend, just actually was just starting to get into Lord of the Rings, and I was explaining to him how I read The Hobbit in grade six, I think. So that would have been like probably 11 years old, 10 years
mm,
old, and that was like I was finished at that point. That was like the one book that like kind of really was like the gateway book for me. Um, but some of my favorite books of all time. I really like the Sword of Truth series by
oh my
uh,
god, The Wizard's First Rule is
Wizard's
awesome.
First Rule. Yeah, Wizard's First Rule,
Yeah,
that whole
yeah.
series.
By Terry Goodkind.
Very good kind. Yeah, yeah. So I think it's gotten a little crazy at this point. Like I remember reading the original. I think there's like 12 books or 10 books, and it basically it was like, yeah, that's over now. And then like a few years later, he's like, oh yeah, actually it's back because I have no other good ideas and this makes money. So here's another 10 books. Um, so I think they started writing them again. I just haven't read them, but I read The Wizard's First Rule when I was 13, I think, 13 or 14. And that was like, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest book. Um,
Yeah, I think
so
I
yeah,
stopped at Confessor. I think
yeah,
after that I was a bit, but I thought Faith of the Empire I thought was brilliant. But yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome that you read those. Yeah,
yeah. So those were always, yeah, those were really good books. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I've been in GW hobby since I was 12, 13. So I literally read, I have old paperback Black Library books from
ooh,
when I was like 13. Like those were some of the first fantasy novels I used to read. I used to read so many of those old Star Wars novels, like Star Wars Legends, like Rogue Squadron, the Thrawn trilogy, that kind of stuff. So when I was younger, those were always fun. But I think I've actually read the physical Lord of the Rings trilogy. I used to read it like literally once a year. Um, and I had a single like anthology. It was like this thick. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it was like this thick. And the book is at this point is like completely destroyed. So yeah.
all right, good.
Um,
Sorry.
anyway, so back to
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I listen. You know what? I'm so lazy these days because I like to be efficient. I haven't read a physical book in probably 3 years. I'm like all about the audiobooks these days. So I have an Audible subscription. I'm not sponsored, by the way. But if you want to sponsor this channel, Audible, and you're listening, get in touch with this guy. Um,
I I don't
so
have that. We actually have I don't know if you know this, but we have zero sponsorship. Like, and we turned down all sponsorship.
okay,
So
this channel's a little too edgy for sponsors, probably.
yeah, maybe.
Anyways, I was just kidding, obviously, but yeah. So I have an Audible subscription. It's been awesome. Because you can get Black Library books on it, which is
Mm,
great for much cheaper than like GW. It's like $50 Canadian for like a Black Library novel, but
oh
on
wow.
Audible it's $15 a month for one credit, which is essentially any novel. So you can buy $50 novels for like $15. Um, and so I listen to a lot of audiobooks these days. So that's kind of my jam because I can paint and I can work,
Yeah.
which is really important. And I can work out. Sometimes I literally will go for like a bike ride for like an hour and listen to like I'll be like sweating my balls off on a bike ride, but like listening to like Jonathan Keeble narrate like the Horus Heresy like so calmly, and it's like if people saw me like walking by, they probably think I'm listening to some like banging techno or something, but literally I'm just listening to like Heretics Die, and that's all hyped up, like listening to like 40K, just getting me all like kind of like going on the bike ride. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. 40K. So yeah, so I started with a mega battle, I guess they call them, or demo game. Um, this was when in fifth edition fantasy. So Bretonnians versus Lizardmen, I think, was the box set. And yeah, I played one demo game. The manager was like, "Come back on Sunday for the mega battle." I did, and I got my free Lizardman warrior. Like they give you like free
Ooh.
Lizardman to paint, and that was it. Rest is history. So I was mostly a fantasy player for most of uh, um, my Warhammer career. Rest in peace. And I only really started playing 40K like seriously in eighth edition at the start of eighth. I did play some third edition 40K, but um, like I actually used to work for, well, like you. I actually worked in GW retail when I was 16. I got a job at the Games Workshop when I was 16 years old for and like if you're a 16-year-old kid and you get to work at Games Workshop, it's like the greatest job you've ever had, right? I was like, this is amazing. Like I literally get to like work at Games Workshop when I was 16. And when you did that, you had to play all the games. Like you couldn't just be like, no, the other games suck. Fantasy is the game to play. So I had a Chaos Space Marine army in third edition 40K and a bunch of Lord of the Rings crap, which I sold long sold. So but I played mostly fantasy. Fifth edition, sixth edition Hero Hammer. I quit after sixth edition fantasy, so I skipped seventh edition, and then I came back. I took like a break. I went to university, stuff like that, and then I came back for eighth edition fantasy. Played played almost the entire edition of eighth edition fantasy, which I think back then, like nowadays, like they're doing editions like every 3 years.
Mm.
back then people forget like sometimes it was like 5 years between editions, and
Yeah.
sometimes your army book would be like 13 years old. Like the old sometimes army books would go 3 editions. It was actually insane.
Yeah. Skaven and Bretonia were particularly old at one point. I remember
Yeah, so I played all of 8th edition, and then obviously they killed 8th edition fantasy. They blew up the old world.
they did.
Uh,
How do you
and,
feel about
and
that? Okay.
so at first I mean, we all heard rumors. We're like, okay, Age of Sigmar is coming. Well, sorry, we didn't know it was called Age of Sigmar at the time, but we're like, there's a new game coming. It's gonna be around bases, and I'm always like fairly open-minded, and I'd played fantasy for competitively too. Like it wasn't just like not super. I wasn't like traveling. I was in my like mid 20s, and I was not that I didn't make much money back then. So like me traveling like internationally like I do now to tournaments and stuff was not really a thing. But I played in tournaments. I played competitively. We would drive 3-4 hours, which in Canada is not that far to drive 3-4 hours for an event. That's like pretty standard. Um, because everything's far away in Canada. So, but yeah. So when it came out, I tried to be open-minded. I was like, okay, what is this game? I was like, okay, what do you mean there's no points? Well, what do you mean bases don't matter? And then I was like, well, what are all these rules where like if I have a beard and you do a dance, that's gonna affect the game? I'm like, this is such a kick in the face of like this game that we love and we played. And instead of like replacing it with like a serious game that's like hey, like we get that we're totally fucking your game, but I don't know if I can swear on this
Yeah, you
show.
can. 100%.
Okay, great. I was like, hey, we're fucking your game, but here's another other good game that like we've put lots of work into that we really believe in. They were like, oh, here's this like half finished, half-ass game that has no points. And I was like, well, how are we supposed to play this? And like I'm sure you remember it right at when AOS came out, it was brutal. Now,
It was.
obviously, in the last like I guess it's been like 5, 6 years now, man, it's improved. Like it's gotten so much better. General's Handbook, all those kinds of things. Like they've really like turned that around. But the
Yeah,
first year of AOS was
yeah.
like
Do you know how the turnaround occurred? Because some people might not
I,
know this. Did you play that Age of Sigmar?
I did. I think I actually know only from listening to you. I think there's either an episode or something where you're telling me that there was like a fight between uh like one of the guy that originally wrote it, and maybe it was, yeah. So I just remember there was some drama at
No, I
the
meant I more meant how the game became a game. Because you're right, like those early bits of although Nick Thompson and Nathan Prescott will both disagree with you that points ruined Age of Sigmar. I think they're very much on the thin end of that wedge. I don't agree, but it was a guy called Mo Ashraf that we really owe everything to, who took the battle plan, and it's really relevant when we're going to start talking about 40k in a minute,
yeah.
because he took War Machine Horde scenarios effectively, and he put those down, and then he created a point system for every unit in the game, and it was, I mean, he worked really hard, but he didn't nail it. Definitely, there were some massive problems, but big all hail Mo comp. But the interesting bit is those battle plans haven't changed, and they've always been orientated around fixed objectives and fixed deployments. And obviously
Right.
now, new 40k, we're seeing that be the case. So actually, as much as there's a kind of the blowing up of 8th edition fantasy has led us to where 9th edition 40k is a little bit right now, which I quite like, that kind of like circular, or maybe like that to understand where it came from. That's quite cool to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, like I tried really hard. Like I gave it. I was I had an open mind. Like we got a one of our friends got a demo copy of the box game. Like I tried to play some games. They were like bases don't matter. I'm like, how can bases not matter? Like how can bases not matter? Like that. Like what? Like explain to me. So can you stat like there and I mean I'm sure anyone that was in that, well, this the salt from fantasy players. I mean people were burning armies. It was a lot. And I think had they released the game with a little bit more like humility and said, hey, like, but it I think the for me the straw that broke the camel's back was like the some of the silly rules that they put in, because it was such a slap in the face of like everything that the way that I played, which was like this was before three ways to play, remember, right? So
Mm.
so it was like, oh, everyone just show up with your collection and just, dude, I had 6,000 points of Chaos Warrior, so like am I supposed to haul that around and like Like, what is the? Anyways, so yeah, so that put me off. So I quit at the end of Fantasy.
Mhm.
At the end of Fantasy, literally. I did read all the end times. Oh yeah, and like it was like, hey, buy all these books, and then we're gonna kill your game, right? So that was also a bit of a
Yeah, it was. I'm in no way advocating. I love what Age of Sigmar is now, but I'm in no way
for
advocating for
sure.
A, how the company handled it at the time. It was atrocious. B, anyone who still feels burnt by it is completely, in my opinion, in the right.
Yeah,
And I actually think that the biggest thing that came out of that was the community understood that they actually could take some ownership of their own game and start to
yeah,
create a good gaming space for ourselves, which I actually thought was. I think that's a positive, but yeah, no, I definitely feel that, especially having bought all of the limited edition End Times books. Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
mug,
I still
a big mug.
I actually I actually just sent Peter sorry Pablo from Frontline. I had one of the novels like the Archaon novel, and I actually just sent it to him because he's been trying to collect those to read them. I'm like, dude, don't do it. It's like it's like you don't want to read them. Like it's so sad because it's such a cool story. Like I remember reading that book, that Archaon End Times, and at the end, like it's like it's like he won. He won because I've been a Chaos player my whole life, right? That was my first army, still like my lifelong army. So I was like, yes, Chaos, we win. And then I was like, oh, like fuck.
So you were rooting for your own
That's,
demise. That's brilliant.
yeah, I was I was so excited, and then they're like, oh yeah, actually we fucked it. But obviously, like that was then. Games Workshop today is a completely different company. This was before Warhammer Community. This was before they had any sort of outreach. This was still in the Kirby days, I believe. So
Yeah.
before Kevin Runchi. So this is when GW was basically literally a castle that no one could communicate to. There's no, you didn't hear from them. There was no communication. It was just like, here's these Age of Sigmar things, and have fun. And we were just like sitting there holding our dicks, like wondering what the fuck's going on. Now, I agree with you. Like, I still have not fully dabbled into Age of Sigmar. I've played a few games since it's like completely turned around, and I just don't have time. If I had time to play multiple games right now, I think I would. But um,
It's hard. It's hard. As someone who tries to be
very hard.
by gamer, it's not the easiest. It's not the easiest thing to approach both, and I think because as much as Eighth Edition takes some elements from Age of Sigmar and is its own beast, like there's some fundamental core changes, which, as we've seen in Eighth Edition 40k, you've been able to use to your advantage because you are a very successful Eighth Edition 40k gamer, right? Like, how did the competitive jumping into 40k and then like what made you jumped into it because you still wanted to play, and then you've obviously now started to do very very well. So like, take us through that journey if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so I knew I wanted to get back. Like, so after they killed fantasy, I've always been a hobbyist, and painting and like painting models has always been something I've enjoyed. So even after 40 fantasy was dead, I still actually painted, kind of here and there. I would like buy a model, or sometimes I'd do commissions for people, which is awful. I don't know how, like, I've always thought like what would it be like to be a commission painter. I tried doing it for like 6 months, just like low key, and I was actually quite busy, and I was like, this is so miserable. Like, I don't know how I could ever do this. Like, you spend all this time on models, and like with commission painting, it's like if you actually do a good job, the dollar per hour that you get paid to like do that painting, it's like zero. And you're like, okay, so now, and then you ship it off, and it's awful. Anyways, um, um, I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna play 40k either at the time. This was at the tail end of seventh, and all I had heard was horror stories because I'd never played seventh edition, but I'd heard horror stories about how seventh edition was such a shit show with all the rules and the Death Stars and the invisibility and all this stuff. But then they dropped Wrath of Magnus, and they released the Magnus, which was I think the first Primarch model.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is the greatest, coolest thing ever. Because I did read the Horus Heresy novels. Um, I started actually reading them on a trip to Europe, and like I think I read Horus Rising on my way to Europe, and I was in Europe for 2 months. And like by the time I got back, I was on like the 30th, not like the 28th novel or something like that. Um, so like I was like fully into the Horus Heresy, even though I didn't play. Um, and so I started playing. So I bought Magnus just to paint because I was like, I'm not gonna play seventh edition. It sounds like a nightmare. So I bought like Magnus and like a box of Rubric Marines just to paint for fun. And then I started hearing rumblings. Oh, like eighth edition's coming. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just keep painting some chaos. I'll bide my time until 8th edition drops, and then I'll jump right in with 2 feet once 8th edition comes. And I was always a competitive player. Like I actually won. Um, I won my first. Uh, went to my first grand tournament. So when Games Workshop used to run the grand tournaments, when I was like in 2002, 2003. So we had like a Vancouver grand tournament. I went all the way to the Calgary grand tournament, Seattle
Oh
grand
wow.
tournament. Yeah, so we set so and then I remember winning the staff tournament. It was actually really cool because back then Canada's huge. So we would do regional staff tournaments for when I worked for Games Workshop, and then they'd fly us all the head office. And back then, of course, there's a Canadian head office now. There isn't, but back in the day there was. So I was always competitive, but not like I was also young, so I wasn't like super competitive. I didn't have a ton of like money to be traveling all over the place, spending it on events and stuff. So I decided to get into it. The first like 6 months, I was just really just painting. I was playing like pure Thousand Suns, like Index Thousand Suns for the first like 6 months, and
Mm.
then as I was learning more about like, oh, I was like, what is this soup? Like, someone tell me. So I started like, so then I was fully corrupted by like all the like power gaming. Started listening like kind of getting way more into it, and then yeah, that was kind of all she wrote. I think I went to my first like 8th edition event in the summer of like the following summer when it was released. Um, and I was like hooked. I was like hooked right back into competitive gaming. I spent basically, and then I went crazy. I was like I got to play in every event. So for like the second half of that year, I think ended up going to like 12 more events before the end of the year. And then the following year, which was last year, 2019, was the year where I was like, okay, going into this year, I really enjoyed playing competitively. I got a lot better at the game. I was really starting to learn the game a lot more, and I was like, I really want to commit to improving. And yeah, I just think like competitive gaming. I still don't really know how I did so well, to be honest. I'm like, huh. I was like, how did I win all those events? Like, I don't understand. Like, but I definitely feel like uh, you know, a lot of stars aligned for me. Like I had my list was a solid list that I really got good at playing.
Mm.
Rest in peace, Plague Bearers. They're no longer they're good. And I think I just got it was a good mix of like luck and skill and just learning my army and really focusing on playing well.
Yeah, so
Um,
that was one of the questions I was going to
yeah.
ask. How did you commit to getting better? Like what was your as attending lots of events? Have you got any advice for people? Because obviously that's quite a meteoric rise from pure Index Thousand Suns to taking out a whole bunch of events and being worldwide renowned. So what was your steps? What did you do? A lot of push-ups.
Yeah. It's probably not enough actually. I I think the biggest thing for me was, um, like when I first started playing. Like, look, even when I played fantasy competitively, I was always like a 4-1 player. So I wasn't like a bad player. Like, it's not like I didn't know how to win, but I never had that like cutting edge killer instinct of like tournament winners, right? So
Mm.
I would play, I would maybe win my first two games, lose a game, and then kind of be in that like top, I was a very often finished top 10 or like top 15. I've always been a big hobbyist, so like I would perpetually get best painted awards and best overall awards because I'd finish fairly high. And in fantasy, if you played fantasy back then, I don't know, I know Age of Sigmar is probably closer to that. But nowadays in 40K, we take for granted that like back then the real prize was best overall, like best general, which is kind of what people really like look at now in 40K, is a great thing. But when I played fantasy, people were gunning for best overall. Like best general was like, okay, whoever wrote the most broken power game list, it doesn't matter. But like who actually put it together as a whole hobbyist, sportsmanship, painting, gaming. Like that was really the prize, especially in like our meta and our scene where I mean we're Canadian, so we obviously appreciate people being nice and winning. And I guess I would always do well. I won, a bunch of best painted. I won sometimes I'd win a best overall or second best overall. And So I was always a good player, but I just never was able to kind of get over that hump. And for the first like 6 months of playing 40K, it was like same boat. Um, and I literally had right before I literally didn't win my first event until like January of like 2019. And it was one of those things where I was finishing like top five, or I'd go like 4-1 or like 5-1, and I just couldn't. And I just found that I started to because I was playing more and I was really like analyzing why I was losing games. That was and actually thinking about not just how to play the game, but how to win the game. And I think it was really a bit of a mindset shift for me. Trying to figure out, okay, like um, recognizing patterns, I think. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but like when you play a game as complex as 40K, you need to have a minimum base knowledge of all the other armies, right? So that takes
Mm.
time, it takes experience, and you need a minimum base knowledge of being in situations and knowing what to do in those situations. And there's no substitute for that than experience. And I think I think around like 6 months of playing competitively, I just hit that kind of critical mass of experience where like every time I played a game, I knew what I needed to do to win because I'd played a game similar enough to that. And if there are certain difficult situations in the game, because I'd been through that and I'd either done the right thing that previous time or done the wrong thing and learned from it, I knew what to do in those situations. So just through that experience, like you reduce the amount of mistakes you make, you play the game with more confidence and like more like I guess composure. Like you know exactly what to do in each situation, and that can't be understated how important that is, especially at the high level. And then at some point for me, it just clicked, right? So I just got to the point where my army was, and obviously you need to be able to write a good list, and it has to be like okay, like you don't have to have the best list, and obviously in 40K, besides a few like outliers, there's been very few like best lists that beat everything. There's always a counter to a lot of lists,
Mm.
but you need to also have a solid army that you know really well. And um, a lot of people meta chase, but sometimes it's better to play a list you're really familiar with. I mean, there's lots of players that are known for playing a certain faction, and they're very, very good with those factions. Like I know, like Scary plays Dark Eldar. He's excellent with Dark Eldar,
Mm.
but like he also plays other lists. But like, there's lots of players that are very strong with certain factions, and I think once you've once you really gotta put in the time, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah,
There's no real secret.
table time. Yeah, table
Yeah,
time.
table time.
Table
I
time
played
all
a
the
lot
time.
of game. I played a lot of games that year, like a lot of games, and a lot of tournament games where it mattered, not just like beer and pretzels games. Not to say that those games aren't important, but you have to play games against other people that are trying to achieve the same thing. Because if they don't really like put in the same amount of, I guess, effort to win, then
Mm.
it doesn't push you uh, to like win. I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the best advice you can ever get, really, I think, is always try and play people who you think might be better than you, and also play tough matchups. It's very easy if your mate's got the easy army that you can kick in, but help them develop a better set of lists or armies or ways of playing, and then build your skill level up, build their skill level up as well. No one ever wants to go to a table and just walk over someone turn one. There's not a real lesson to learn there. I don't. I can understand that. I'd like to go back and touch on something that I thought was quite cool that you said was best overall, because we've definitely seen that fall by the wayside a little bit. I mean, no one really talks about someone's army looking great. They're just like, did you win the big event? Are you
Yeah.
sad to see that go away, or would you like to see that come back somehow?
Yeah. I mean, um, I think that like as I've gotten so if you'd asked me in my fantasy days
Mm.
what I thought the most important award was, I would definitely say best overall. Instantly with no hesitation. Um Best general or like I was like, yeah, but that's not who cares, right? Um and I think at the point is because I was winning lost best overall, a lot of best overall, so I was like, of course it's the most important award. Um, but one thing that what I definitely do appreciate more, and dude, I used to get arguments on the internet, with like people who, because if people don't remember, Warhammer used to have comp. We used to have Swedish comp. We used to
Uh huh.
have
Uh huh.
comp. So comp, what I mean by comp, if you guys don't know, is there was literally another set of house rules that would basically score your army based on how broken it was. So
Yeah.
there was different types of systems, composition systems essentially, that if you built X army, you would get like 20 out of 30 composition points. And that would actually sometimes contribute to your best overall too. So like that's how broken the game was. If you think about it, imagine trying to implement something like that in 40K right now. Imagine someone tried to say, okay, we're going to put a comp system in 40K. It would be a revolt. Like people just play what they play and what they want, as broken as it is right now.
Yes.
And
Well, I was going to actually say that because one of the things that I think about best overall is because not that the game wasn't valid as a game, but like you said, there was an entire comp system around.
right,
Like, I mean, ITC missions and that entire setup is because trying to give a broken game a set of ways to play well enough that people could be like, this is a valid experience to game with. So, like, would you say that like best overall was more important because the game was not defunct, but let's just call it ropey at best, and now the game has maybe got in a more healthy place that you could be like, okay, cool, you're the best general. Don't need to talk about anything else other than that.
yeah, I think that is a big part of it. Like the reason best overall was more important is because back then the game was fundamentally so unbalanced that we had to put a comp system in. Second, I think I mentioned, but like sometimes you would go 10 to 12 years before your codex, or your army book. Sometimes your army book would be 3 editions old. So how is it even possible that your 10-year-old, 12-year-old army book is supposed to be competitive? So the only way that so like the armies were just um, uh, so out of whack. For those that remember the transition from fifth edition fantasy to sixth edition, they released Ravening Hordes, which was like a little supplement that had
Mm.
all the. They basically like nuked all the army books, and then they released the supplement Ravening Hordes. I think I still have it somewhere. That was groundbreaking at the time. The fact that they would get rid of all the books and release like a supplement, essentially an index, is essentially what it was, for fantasy. That was groundbreaking. But then that was in sixth edition, and they never did that again. So like basically for 2 more editions, some people had books that came out at the start of sixth, and then like 12, like literally 11 years later, they're still running the same army books. So I think in general, because the game was so unbalanced and because we had things like comp systems, people didn't care about best general as much because it kind of just meant you had the most broken army, and it didn't actually mean that like a whole lot. So
Yeah, yeah. I,
I don't know what the original question was, but
it's okay. I'll
yeah.
go back to. Can I just
Oh
say?
yeah, the best best
Can I
overall.
just shout out a couple of subs? Both Reef and Mr. Sneezy. Thanks for subscribing, and everyone for being here. This is Jim. This is when we're talking all sorts at the minute. Best overall, but you getting. But so when you played eighth edition, I'll ask you a new question so we could reset. With new edition. 8th edition 40k demons. You started off with Thousand Suns, but the lists that you were playing a lot were demon and chaos centric, right?
Yeah, so I knew the day I knew had become a competitive gamer. I've been a lifelong Slanesh and Tzeentch player, so my Chaos Army is stretching all the way back to like first when I started playing Warhammer, through third edition 40K, through eighth edition. Tzeentch and Slanesh, those are my boys, or girls, or anything in between, right? But those were always my gods. And I hated Nurgle. I was like, oh, Nurgle's the worst. Like the models are gross. Like the paint, I hate painting Nurgle. It's just not something I would ever do. Same with Corn. I just like it's Corn so stupid. It's just fighty killer, right? The day I knew I became a power gamer was when I bought my first 3 boxes of Plague Bearers, and I was like, okay, these are just too good for me not to have. So I'm gonna just be a power gamer now and start playing like with models and gods that I absolutely hate, right? So and yeah, so I like my first demon purchases were like bloodletters, or sorry, were horrors, because I was like, oh yeah, Tzeentch, cool, awesome. But
Yeah.
yeah, so then I bought my first unit of plague bearers, and I put them in a list. I was like, I only had 30 guys, only 30. Um and I played like one game with them, and I was like, these are the greatest things ever. Immediately went and bought another 30. So painted those up in like 3 days. I was like, all right, now I got 60. This is amazing. So that kind of was like the transition for me from like, kind of cool Zinchian, Slaneshi, like cool looking, like, very like stylish armies to like, I don't care, give me the Nurgle, give me the corn, like, like I want it. So that was kind of like the first unit of Plague Bears was like my gateway drug into like competitive gaming. I was like, oh, this is why I keep losing games because I'm running really shitty lists.
I think that really helps a lot of people when they eventually. It's hard though to know that, right? Like, because you get so much feedback from so many voices on the internet. I know earlier on you were saying you row with people on the internet about those things. I mean, I never get into a row on the internet, which is kind of the way I keep myself out of these situations if I can. But knowing where. I think listening to podcasts, listening to stats, big shout out always to Peter for the 40k Stats Center, being able to like recognize and understand the faction strengths and weaknesses is really important. And you can do that through anecdotal evidence of just playing, like you've just said. But I know you said you also listened to a bunch of stuff to pick that up.
Well, I remember following like the first I think it was like the first ETC for WCT, whatever you guys want me to call it. At the time it was called ETC. Screw off. First ETC for 8th edition, and I remember reading some of the lists, and it was like 180 Plague Bearers, or like people running like 150 Plague Bearers, and I'm like, what is this? I'm like, and if you're like a fairly casual gamer, and then someone's like, hey, go look at the lists that people run at ETC, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on here? Like these are like some of these lists are just so absurd that like I don't even know what game they're playing, right? But because it was basically such a different game than like Rulebook 40k, and like the meta with like the team format and like all the different things that go into like creating like a balanced WC like ETC like team, and the way that you build skew lists and all those kinds of things, like the average player doesn't, if they don't understand all those like dynamics and they look at some of the lists that the ETC players are playing, you're like what is this crazy like nonsense, right? I just remember reading some of those lists and I was like, oh my god.
Oh, sorry. I was going to just say, especially the team composition of it, like really adds to that element sometimes even more than you might realize sometimes. And then when you listen to the ETC/WTC players, you're like, what planets are you on? And they're like, I don't even think about the game. I only care about the boards. And you're like, big shout out to my man Tom. But it's fascinating, and I've loved having Tom on the show over the past like 2.5 years because the experience that he's been able to bring to the show, and then me from my competitive background, and then Nick from his, and we all approach it differently. So like it's fascinating, the melting pot of 40k competitive knowledge that's out there in different places. I think. Anyway. So, a big question in the chat. Have you always played Chaos, never strayed from the Chaos?
So, my first army, when I started Warhammer, was Chaos. My first actual purchase ever, I still remember, was a box of the old Hunchback Chaos Warriors. You got 12 of them, and it was like $28 for a regiment, which was like, now is like it would be $70 Canadian. It was like $28. But I did play, I played Dark Elves, Empire. I played in Fantasy. Tomb Kings I played, which were awesome. And then in 40k I played Chaos, Space Marines. Chaos and Space Marines. So I've always played Chaos. It's always been my favorite faction. But I definitely played like other factions and stuff. I've never 40k obviously because I've just been in 8th since it started the edition. So like I guess 3 years now. Fuck, it's been a while. Feels like yesterday. Because I was just yesterday I was pushing around my like Lord of Change and playing Index Warhammer. So most I've always played Chaos. It's still my one love, and I've actually been having a lot of I've been having a bit of an existential crisis. Like literally last night, I just finished my last painting project. And I'm like, okay, so we got a new edition in like most likely like 6 weeks or so. It'll probably drop. I'm like, okay, so do I continue painting my Marines because that'll probably be good. Right, because they're Marines.
Yeah, because they're Marines.
Do I finish up a bunch of Chaos projects that I have because Chaos?
I mean, I feel everyone feels like that, right?
I was like, what's the right call here to prepare myself for 9th edition? Like, what do I actually paint? So I think I'm gonna paint Marines because I'm a power goober and they'll probably be much better than Chaos. Based on everything I've seen so far, Chaos is gonna be, unless there's like some serious FAQs or serious point changes in the positive side for Chaos, or if maybe they don't shift as much and everyone else shifts a lot, which I
Yeah.
don't think is gonna happen because we have uh I actually this example I was like, okay, so cultists are 6 points now, intercessors are 20 20 points.
20 points.
So,
Yeah.
180 points of intercessors is 9 intercessors. 180 points of cultists is 30 cultists. In is there any scenario at all in 40K where 30 cultists beats 9 intercessors in any range, in any like, even if they charge, even if they get the first turn, even if like there's literally zero, and take away their
Situation.
legion traits, there's zero situations in the game where 30 cultists beats 9 intercessors. It's not even close. So I'm like, how is this, like, this is not a good sign for us. So I'm a little worried, and and even with the smaller tables, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about,
Yep.
the board and the new horde rules, the board presence, quote unquote, of the cultists is even less important because we're going to be playing on smaller boards. There's going to be rules against hordes. There's going to be probably more terrain and easier to hide those 9 Marines. And I'm just like, it's not even close. So if that's the direction of the balance, which I don't think is the worst thing, like, okay, if you guys want to make cultists bad, make them bad. I only have 80 painted, thank God. I don't have like 300 painted like some of those ETC players. Um, but um, but it's not a good sign. It's not a first good. Like, if they could have put out any other example, and I probably wouldn't be that worried. But like that was like a objectively bad example to use.
I think it was, especially comparatively. They were like, "Here's one example." You're like, "Okay, it's this is going up." Here's another example, but way worse. You're like, "Oh no, that you've given us two ends of a spectrum." I think, but I think I'd like to come back to the conversation about chaos, where it was, and then where you think it's going to be, especially with Psychic
Sure.
Awakening in a bit, if that's okay. But you
Absolutely.
just touched on a big subject, Twitch chat, and you. 40k minimum suggested board size, and yet WTC, ITC, Nova, Adepticon have all signed off on this is the size we will actually be using at events, and so we will be. I don't want to say downgrading, not sure if that's right, but like there'll be smaller boards, and therefore you'll assume Warhammer World will do the same thing. So we're going to play on smaller boards. I guess before we get into the whys and whatnots, how do you feel about it? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny all these people saying like, "Oh, you can just play on 4x6." Has there, like, anytime Games Workshop is like puts out any sort of like framework, people follow the framework. There's no
Yes.
like okay, so a good example is like even just like power level. Like, yeah, you can play with power level. Who plays with power level? No one. Like, competitively, zero people play with power level. And
Mm,
why is it? Because it's like it's just not like for match play, points is the way you're supposed to play.
mm.
There's a million other examples of Games Workshop saying, well, you could do X if you want. And it's like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
I could, it's like I could do a lot of things, but like we're gonna play it the closest to competitive rulebook version as possible. So saying like, oh, we could do that is like that's such a like bad argument
It's
for
also it's
people.
also it's also
Yeah,
a way to protect themselves from any clash back. As we talked about at the top of the show, you know they're a company who have acted in bad faith towards their community several times, and as much as they've made some positive strides and done some really good things recently, like ultimately they I don't often I mean it seems arbitrary, but I have seen some justifications for it. But yeah, it will be the standard way that
absolutely.
people will play Warhammer. That's irregardless. And
Yeah,
and you can put a pin in it if anyone wants to just clip this clip right now. 100% Age of Sigmar 3, whenever that rolls around, 100% is going to be exactly the same. It's going to be
right.
that board specification. So like I guess I think you're 100% right. It's a fact. It's going to happen. How do you feel about it gaming wise, and how do you feel about it like for everyone else?
So like I know there's a lot of like doomsayers, and if you think about like the game is changing, the rules are changing, but and this isn't a reset edition, so a lot of people are like, oh well, it's gonna be just killier, or it's gonna be very different than uh, currently. But I think people got to remember like there's there's four fundamental huge like levers that are changing in the game. So points values are getting adjusted.
Hmm.
Terrain is getting completely rewritten. Missions are getting completely changed, and army composition is getting completely changed. Now, each one of those on their own is not like a crazy huge change, but in aggregate, those four levers and however they end up changing in the end is going to lead to a very different 40K experience than we have today. So for me to sit here and say, oh, my Tau army is going to be so OP, or my melee army is going to suck, or my X army is going to be so good, it's just impossible to say. And I think anyone that tries to kind of tell you that is full of shit. There's just too much. There's until we have the full picture of all those different things and how they um, work together, we have no idea if this is, and at the end of the day, look, I know Reese. Like I'm not like best friends with him, but like I chat with him. We're friendly. I know Mike. I know some of the other playtesters, and I I feel good about what I'm hearing, and I feel good that like some of these things have been thought out. Now I could be wrong, but at the end of the day, the meta will adapt, the game style will adapt. The um, you know, those things will those things will change. So I'm not really hot or cold on it. Like I'm not a TO, so I don't have 76 by fours that I have to go now chop up. So from that perspective, it's not too bad for me. But at the end of the day, like I like on the surface, I don't think it's either good or bad. I think we have to look at it in the context of the larger rules. We have to see how everything um, pans out. And then the other thing to remember is, look, a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, the edition's changing," but like if you think about 40K 8th edition when the edition started to today, it's a completely different game even within the edition.
Yep.
So, what and think about how we played Index 40K and all the crazy FAQs and all the other stuff that came out since then. So we could be playing one version of 40K right when ninth edition drops, and in 6 months between FAQs, chapter, and maybe another chapter approved, maybe other codex, the new ninth edition codexes,
Mm.
it's also another game. And like think about things like the fly change. That was one small change, and it completely changed the meta. And that was one small rule that they changed. So I don't think ninth edition is gonna be any different. We're gonna play some version of the game when it releases, and 6 months later we're gonna be playing a different version of the game, and then 6 months later we're gonna be playing a different version of the game from that. And that's just, I mean, it's just the way it goes. And I think until we have the whole picture, it's really hard to be like, oh, it's a good or a bad change. I'm very ambivalent. At the end of the
Okay.
day, if it means the games finish faster and they're more like engaging and they're less like, okay, I'm gonna like, uh, I'm very impatient, so I don't like this whole like, okay, we're gonna play super cagey. Like I look at, and I know Richard, like we're good friends. We chat all the time. And like what a beast coming in and just smashing the whole ITC last year and winning the
Mm.
LVO. But like I just remember watching that game against him in in the final, and I was like like it was a very tactical game, but it's like okay, so like who can play more cagey? And then even the game against Sean Naden, like it was from a technical aspect, it was like masters, like two masters playing the game, but
Yeah.
like it wasn't exciting. It was like okay, it's like we're gonna just do nothing for 3 turns, and then everything's gonna happen in one turn, and then there's the winner, right? And that was literally both those games. Like it came down to like 1 or 2 turns at the very end, and some people like that. For me, I like a game that feels like stuff's happening every turn, and so I'm hoping with a smaller board, there's a little bit more, um, it's a little bit more engaging right from the get go. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we'll see.
yeah. I think I understand your point. I think more dynamic games where you're making more choices are interesting. And like one of the things that we talk about a lot on the show is interactivity. Like if you could ask me, do I want a game to be more balanced or more interactive? I'd say more interactive. And interactive is not just rolling my save rolls and taking my models off. That's not the kind of interactivity that I want. Um, I would say that, and I definitely echo all of your points. I think all of them are solid. I think the only thing I would add is that the decision to. So I've read some of the justification for the board change in size, and while I think the idea that maybe it's more practically feasible, like getting a 6x4 board out at home. And I know Canada's pretty big, but like I've always lived in a city centre in England, so I've always lived in a pokey house where putting a 6x4 bit of wood out is actually always a bit of a challenge. So even just reducing it down a little bit so it's more playable at home or in your local clubs or whatever it might be is excellent. I think that's a good long-term change. But the short-term transition is definitely like impactful for a lot of communities, local hobby stuff. Like, and also, what are people going to do?
Absolutely.
They've got a lot of 6x4 mats. Are they going to tape them off? That'll look shit. Like, are they going to cut them? That's a lot of effort. Like, it's a lot for the customers. And I know some of the biggest, so the people most impacted beyond our personal selves will be the organizer of the LVO, organizer of Adepticon. So, and these are all people who are signed off on it, and they've said that they think it's a positive long-term change. So, they're the people who are going to have to either cut boards or map them out or whatever whatever it is that they're going to do to resolve that process. So they're the people affected by it. For me, I quite like the space. I think it's definitely going to encourage stuff to be more condensed, and I mirror that means that people are going to engage with each other more, right? They're going to fight more. Like there's going to be more hitting, but it also means if we talk about those horde builds, which it looks like they're getting hit, but the ability to block board space, control board space is better in a smaller environment, right? I don't know. I quite like movement being key, and I think less space allows less movement unless movement
Yeah.
comes down. But I don't
I,
know.
I would agree, and I think just like the last thing to add is like I don't necessarily know, and like I've been reading a lot of comments from Reese and some of the other playtesters.
Mm.
I, it sounds like it was driven by kill team. So the fact that it's basically three, so it's like one kill team board, two for combat patrol, three for strike force, just put together. That's how you make the board. That I get that from oh that's really cool that you can do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
But like, why the fuck did you make the kill team board that size then? Why didn't you make the kill team board like 2x4 or like or like 3 by like it's like why did you guys pick that bizarre size for the kill team board to begin with? But like it would have been a lot easier to change the kill team board. Like, hey, we're updating the kill team board to like 2x3 or something. I don't know, whatever version of it. And now two of them is a 4x6, and three of them, or sorry, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Also, how many fucking people are playing Kill Team? Like, how many people are like, what do I do with all these Kill Team boards? They're like racked at home, like, I've got too many. Someone help me. Someone help me.
If anything, the 40k should have driven the Kill Team, not the other way around.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it should have been like, oh, like, we're going to change we want to change 40k so it's different sizes. So now we're going to change our Kill Team board to be 1/3 of the 40k size, 4x6, so that now three of those makes a big 40k table. That's easily what they should have done, and it would have been way less salt because they sell those boards. Like people don't. There's not a whole cottage industry of kill team boards where people are creating whole businesses around kill team boards. Like it's literally like like the amount of 4x6 mats and 4x6 tables out there vastly outnumbers the amount of kill team like custom kill team boards and kill team tables. So just as like a matter of like where they should have, what should have been based on what, I definitely think they should just change the kill team board. That would have made way more sense, infinitely more sense.
Yeah, I agreed. I think it's odd. Like I definitely think that like a smaller board space is like a little bit easier to manage. I guess I don't know. I didn't have any, but maybe I'm 6 foot, like a little bit over, so like I could reach across a board. So I didn't have any challenges with it. I don't think that's an issue. I think it feels fairly arbitrary, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of evidence to say that there's a lot of the arguments are pretty threadbare. It's going to change things. Like, okay, but if it's been approached holistically, if they think this is the long-term best plan, I'm very interested to see which of the companies comes out with that first that space battle mat initially.
Yeah, and like another just quick, like an easy way they could have done it to avoid all this drama. Instead of having it the minimum, they could have said, here's the recommended size, 4x6, but here's the minimum. Don't play smaller than the 44 by 50, whatever the hell it is right now. They could say, we recommend if you're going to play 2,000 points, you play on a 4x6. But if you have to go smaller, don't go smaller than 44 by 60, which is like 3 kill team boards. Done. Now everyone's going to play 4x6s. That's not going to change, right? Like, but instead, like just the way that they there's so many ways they could have done. They could have still made that like suggestion slash change. Because I play 40K, I don't have a kill team board. I don't have one, let alone three. So like, so I like, and I don't want one, like,
Yeah,
because I don't
same.
play kill team. So like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, and also just like you said, like the premise also that all the kill team boards will fit together. It's like cool, but I already have a 6x format, as does absolutely everyone else. Like I have one, or I have a Roma battle board, which is 180 quid or whatever it is. Like so,
Yeah.
I've got like I've already spent a large amount of money on the map, and now like and also the question is, which has been it's been a long time that's been the size. If you're going to change it this edition, does that mean you're gonna change it next edition? Like it's fairly immutable. Like I'm a little bit concerned. But anyway, we've talked about it. I think it seems silly, but there we go. Right,
Yeah.
so unless you got anything else you want to say on it.
No, I was just gonna say like time will tell whether from a game as if it's good for the game or not. Like obviously there's lots of salty TOs and salty people, but time will tell if it's good for the game, and I think we'll have to see the whole picture before we can make that assessment.
Yeah, I think one of the best things I've heard recently, especially with all the new rules that we're seeing, is there's a lot of we intend this to do X, but I'm sure they intended a lot of the eighth edition rules to do X, and the community did not like. They were like, no, this is wrong. This is not do what you think it is gonna do. Anyway, right. So chaos, specifically demons, with the new psychic awakening. Where were demons at before? What did they need? Before this psychic awakening, but what were you hoping for?
So poor demons. Um, they've they've definitely gone through a lot of versions in this edition. So like I think they're probably the book that's been nerfed the most, I feel. Like literally anytime there's something slightly good, it get nerfed. So 3++ horrors nerfed. Uh like um I don't know, like some of the casters were nerfed, plague bears were nerfed, bloodletters I think were nerfed at some point. Um just about everything's been nerfed. Every stratagem's been nerfed. Like it's just been just a brutal like
Also,
hill of
also, they didn't
nerfs.
even get a lot to start with, right? Like the initial, like 2 pages of stratagems for 4 gods,
Yeah, so
like in the initial book.
I think demons are maybe like the fifth or sixth book. And I was complaining, I was talking to Paul Murphy from Fortune Narrative. I'm like, demons, they've literally reprinted those goddamn Slanesh data sheets like 18 times at this point. Every publication, it's like, oh yeah, here's your 10 Slanesh data sheets. I'm like, dude, we get it by now. We have it. It's like everywhere. Stop reprinting them and saying that this is like your rules. It's so annoying. They literally have 10 data sheets that are not even in the book. I'm like, okay, so I hope they get a new codex, first of all. So demons, yeah, so it's just the books. The problem is the best part about demons has always been the characters in eighth edition, anyways. I know there's lots of people that have bad touched by them in seventh and like have PTSD from some of the horror summoning, free horror summoning, all that stuff. But
Mm.
yeah, let's not talk about that. So in eighth edition, the characters were good and the
Mm.
troops were good. That's it. When like scream anything fast attack. When was the last time? Can you even name one demon fast attack? No, you can't because no one's seen it. Chariots. When was the last time you saw a demon chariot on the table?
Never.
Tell me. Never. When was the last time you saw like a heavy support? Demon heavy support. A
I
soul
don't even know what
grinder.
they
Come
are. I
on.
don't even know what they are. I don't even know
I
what
mean,
the demon heavy supports are.
like soul grinder. Come on. Like, all right. Like it's so bad.
I do have 9 blood crushers on my paint table.
Okay.
Any hopes?
So let's talk about blood crushers. Okay. So everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh, this new stratagem. It's great. Okay. So blood crushers. First of all, point for point, blood crushers. Because they all have shit for saves.
Yeah.
You're better off taking the same amount of points in bloodletters. So like whatever you could do for whatever amount of points you want blood crushers, point for point, the same amount of bloodletters do way more because the footprint. So you can fit 30 like 9 blood crushers. The bases are like gargantuan, right? Like
Yeah.
fitting 9 blood crushers in a
Huge.
combat is not easy.
Nope.
It's a lot. So bloodletters are better. A, they're troops. B, they take up more board space. C, they they can like they're just better in every way, right? the so then oh yeah, so the demons in general. So you never see anything outside of the troops and the characters, and even the characters. The greater demons weren't great. There was basically what you had was demon princes, some of the heralds, depending on how you wanted to spruce up like various troop units, and then you had like then you just had like the basic troops, which was, to be honest, horrors, bloodletters, plague bearers, nurglings, and brimstones. Those are the only things you saw. You never saw really demonettes. Um, you never really saw like blue, like when was the last time anyone fielded a unit of blue horrors ever?
So what is it that those troop units would do? What were their roles, like the different units?
It, so yeah, it was a lot of times before they got nerfed, it was for battalions. So like for in a mixed chaos list, 30 brimstones and say two characters was a good CP battery, or three units. Nurglings are still great. They're very useful. They add a lot of utility. They're very good on objectives. They're very hard to kill, and they fill out troop tax. So you can get a fairly good demon battalion. You had the Corn Prince in there that would do really good against knights. The Mirror obviously is probably one of their best units. Or you could throw in like a Herald for the gem of Forbidden Gem. So there was some play in there with, and then obviously when Plague Bears weren't 8 points a model, doing like 60, and everyone wasn't a chapter master in every single Marine battle there wasn't chapter masters, and Thunderfire cannons. Then Plague Bears were also good. But those things kind of fell by the wayside. So even still to this day, I was writing some chaos lists with like maybe like two units of Nurglings, a unit of Brimstones, and like two demon characters because they can add something to the list. But what I would love to be able to do is play the 9 Brimstones I have, or the 9 Screamers I have, or put together Secret Chariot, or have a reason to play Blood Crushers, or Beasts of Nurgle, or Plague Drones, or any of these other really cool models. Like they have a fully plastic army. Like think about it. There's very few armies that are fully plastic. So they have this really amazing range. I think the models are they still really hold up. Bloodletters, all those things hold up, but point for point, not worth it. And then the anything past the troops, just objectively bad, stat wise, points wise, rules wise, just objectively bad. So you just never saw it. So what did they need? Well, what they needed was some incentive to take those other choices, and those incentives had to be strong enough to overcome the like mathematics of a very bad unit. So like they needed stratagems and like upgrades to the point where like yeah, screamers are not good, but with this stratagem it totally changes this unit and how it and what it does. But what did they get? Literally 12 stratagems.
Mm-hmm.
Each one is divided by 4 per god, and then divided by 4 again by each unit type. So now I have 9 of those 12 that are for units that I don't take right now because those are bad units. And those 9 of the 12 are terrible. Like people are like, oh, the Blood Crusher strat. Okay, so like, oh, the Blood Crusher strat is really good. So
What
the
does it do?
strat.
What does it do?
Okay, so there's a strat for Blood Crushers. Basically, what you do is you charge the Blood Crushers, and then at the end of the charge phase, you spend, I think it's 1 CP. Every model within an inch of a Blood Crusher, for every Blood Crusher within an inch of an enemy, not the other way around, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, the unit takes a mortal wound, and on a 6, it takes D3 mortal wounds. Okay, that sounds really good on paper. And then if they wipe out the unit, they get a charge again. Okay, so that sounds fantastic. I'm like, oh cool, like charge in, I kill something, I charge again. But if you actually think about it in practical terms, so think about a unit of, say it's a unit of 10 cultists or 10 any other garbage screen in the game. You need a minimum of like 9 Blood Crushers just to even make the stratagem function. Because if you don't kill every single one of those cultists or screens, the unit sits there and dies. And if you roll a 1 or 2 ones on those 9 dice and you don't roll any 6s, you kill 8 cultists and the unit's still there. And if there's 1 cultist left, the unit doesn't die. And you have to get all 9 of these giant goddamn bases within an inch of the enemy. So not only do you have to have like 10, I think the maximum unit size is 10. I might even be 12 for Blood Crushers. I think it's 10 though. not only do you have to get 10 blood crushers within an inch of a single enemy unit and roll well enough to kill the whole unit, which against anything like 10 man or more
Yeah.
is actually like 50-50 that you don't, because you're gonna roll probably two ones and maybe you roll 1/6, but you get like a two on it and you kill 9 models. So if there's even one model left, that whole unit dies. Now your 350-point unit of blood crushers is dead because they have 4+ armor saves. They just get countercharged. So it's just like, okay, like I get what they're trying to do, but like, did anyone actually like try and play this stratagem? Or did anyone actually sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna like just run this through a few scenarios and see how often I actually achieve what I'm trying to do. Imagine even just charging 5 Marines, right? Like
Yep.
a unit of 5 intercessors. There's still, unless again, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if there's 10 cultists or 5 intercessors because they have 10 wounds, right?
Yep.
So like even in that case, you're still not going to kill the unit. But what if it's like 6 intercessors? Then you're totally fucked. There's no way you're going to kill them all. And demons have no shooting of note really.
Yep.
So it's just objectively bad. And then you don't get to, like, your Banner of Blood works once. So you're going to use it off the deep strike because you got to get in. You don't want to risk not making that 3d6 charge. And so if the player is smart and knows you have a 400-point Death Star of Blood Crushers, they're going to stick their screens out super far and let you charge them. And then you get a 2d6 charge from there into, because here's the thing, you don't charge, pile in, consolidate, and then charge the second time. You
Yeah.
charge, you roll the dice, and then from that position, you charge again. So you don't get your extra move to kind of get closer to the enemy, to get past them. You basically stop right there. And you have big bases, so it's very easy for an opponent to basically block you out, so you can't get past that unit. And all of a sudden, you're making another 9-inch charge off on 2d6 now, because your opponent was just smart. Like, it's just,
And
that's
they could
just,
just put another unit behind there. Like, it's that easy to just put another unit behind the first unit, right? Like, it's
yeah,
not like you can block that out fairly easy. Like, I know I mirror your feelings.
it's
So
just so bad.
yeah, so they weren't in a good place anyway. The demons, and have got progressively worse, like you said. So Psychic Awakening, like, is there anything there you think that has brought something positive, or
Yeah.
like, yeah? So what are the highlights, do you think?
So yeah, so it's a mixed bag. So I don't want to, like, look, and I'm only going to really talk about it, and we can talk about what I think it's going to mean for ninth edition. But
Yes.
you got to remember, like, this book was supposed to be out in like February before we had human pandemics,
Yeah.
and so we would have had this book from February, March, April, May, July, June, July. So 5-6 months of this book in use essentially, right?
Mm.
Um, People are like, oh yeah, but in ninth edition it could be good. Okay, but we're not in ninth edition, and this book was written. I know it was written for ninth edition, but until I see what ninth edition is for eighth edition, um, yeah, the greater demon rules are good for eighth edition. I think there's the fact that you have to pay a CP. I don't think is good. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, like just take 17 of the same thing, just spend the stratagem 3 times and get all the traits. I'm like, you bozos, that's gonna be FAQ'd in fucking 2 seconds. Like, don't there's like literally arguments going on about what they're going to do with their 6 warlord traits. Essentially, they're essentially like kind of warlord traits. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm going to give 6 warlord traits to my one greater demon, it'll be awesome. I'm like, if you guys are like honestly think that they're going to allow that, they're going to allow that to stand, like the wording as is ambiguous so that you can pull that off, but like it's very clear that it's not intended. And then
Mm.
people are kind of like, oh yeah, well, until GW says otherwise. I'm like, guys, you're not even going to play one game until ninth edition at this point, so they're definitely going to FAQ it.
Yeah.
But the Exalted Demon rules are, I like them, and they do add something positive. The problem with Greater Demons has never been that they need more killing power or that they need to have more like tricks. It's because the problem has been they die incredibly quickly in getting them to combat. So, had they released maybe an ability, here's one stratagem for any greater demon to charge 3d6 off deep strike.
Yeah.
Done. All of a sudden, just that one stratagem, all your greater demons are going to see play, right? But right
Yeah.
now, the only thing that can do that is infantry. I think Banner of Blood is only for infantry.
Mhm.
So, or maybe it's cavalry as well. So I think the blood cartridge can use it. But right now, if you deep strike a greater demon, you're rolling a 9, maybe an 8, depending on um, like one of those things. So there are some good things. Um, in the thing of eighth in eighth. Like I think if you want say like a greater demon, a mirror, and like 15 30 brimstones to like for a battalion, that would actually be a good little detachment I think to fit into something, or like a demon prince and a greater demon, and then like for 5 CP that would be really good. But now as we're starting to see ninth, like eight, like yeah, it's getting worse. Like everything I've seen so far is me. So now going back to all those people that are like, oh, wait for ninth. Everything I've seen so far about ninth has actually is going to make demons worse because things like there's no reason to take them as a cheap battalion. They do not function as a standalone book at all. They were terrible standalone book. So the only way people ever took them before was to soup them. And
Yes.
in the new world order, there's no point in doing that because you're going to actually get hurt. Second, they didn't even bother with like legion, like new legion traits or new legion, uh, like the demonic loci, which are essentially our legion traits, are
Mm.
complete trash. They've been complete trash since they were released. No one like they're just garbage. So they could have maybe released legion rules for demons. That would have been cool. So yeah, so hey, it's called Psychic Awakening, and you have literally a psychic army built from the stuff of psychers, and we didn't get new psychic powers. Come on, guys. Like
That's a
it,
good point.
it's like it feels so phoned in. It's actually ridiculous.
But that's how I
So
felt about the Demon Codex. Like, I felt the same
yeah,
thing. Like, I think they don't have an idea what to actually do with demons. I think that's quite clear. And the Greater Demons one has always stressed me out because they just are dead. Like if you've seen things like Morty and Magnus not get a lot of play, and I'm pretty certain that's right. You don't tend to see Morty and Magnus get a load of play, and they've got some big survivability built in, right? Like if they're
yeah,
not on the board, why are the Greater Demons going to be on the board? What do they bring to the party that those two other big models don't really bring in? Um, so yeah, like I can agree
yeah, and
with you
like
there.
we haven't seen the monster rules for ninth, so there's obviously some improvements to monsters. Um, we haven't seen the train rules, so maybe the train rules are good enough where I can start hiding greater demons, right? So we don't know, right? Like I'm talking in a vacuum just based on what I've seen.
Hmm.
Do I think those rules are going to be strong enough that it's going to be worth it for me to bring? And we haven't actually even seen the detachment rules, and I would suspect. So, quote me now, hear me now, quote me later. I think is the saying.
Good.
I bet you we don't see Supreme Command detachments in ninth edition. I bet they're gone.
Ooh.
Um,
Ooh.
I, that's my one prediction. No more Supreme Command.
Mm.
So, I mean, I could be wrong. Um, what that means is taking just like say if I want to just take three Trader Demons, which is like the only reason you would take them now,
Mm.
way that or maybe a patrol of like Greater Demons. It's going to cost you points because it's not going to have your Warlord because the Demon Warlord traits are trash. Like, could we have gotten some new Warlord traits, guys? Come on. But I think yeah, I'm very worried about Chaos in ninth edition so far from everything I've seen. I'm reserving judgment. I'm not going to like skies falling, but it hasn't made me feel more confident. I think the lists that feel like they're going to get better are going to be mono faction, single detachment books. So not things like Gene Steel Cult, because I don't again unless they have special rules to. But like, can you imagine doing three different factions with Gene Steel Cult? You'd have no CP to start the game
Hmm.
because it's going to cost you 6 CP just to have two other battalions. Now again, I don't know if there's going to be special FAQs that if all of your detachments are from the same quote unquote army book, you actually get like additional discounts or additional CP refunded. So who knows? But I hope there is something like that because right now I don't know how these like demons they're saying, oh, take corn god specific detachments, but also we're going to punish you for taking more than one detachment. That's essentially what they're saying.
Yeah, I think also there's some worry as well with some of the elements that we've seen. So we've seen also that we're going to do actions in 40k in the future, and also that they've said that there will be secondaries that are also inside of an army book. I think the problem with the demons in specifics, like the Codex and also the Psychic Awakening being phoned in and I think I agree with you there, is that what are the actions and your whatever you're going to do, like, is it going to be similarly phoned in, on the, when it doesn't seem to apply, or when they don't seem to put some of them in effect, it's a little bit concerning. And I'm super pro the new edition. Like, I'm very excited to see it. I'm a bit impatient. I just want it to be out so I can understand, because I
Yeah.
want to build lists and work around it, and also to work out how it plays. But also, we are talking about the army, the company that released all the Marine stuff early on in the year, and that was an awful experience for everyone. So, like, I know what they intend is what they say, but what they do is sometimes not as effective. And so that is that your takeaway really from the Psychic Awakening Demons, that it just missed the mark completely for what you needed
Completely,
for demons.
completely missed the mark, and like it feels like they're not even trying. Like there's so many things that any like I was thinking, I'm like, well, okay, Jim, don't be so like critical. Like, what if you had to write those rules? What are some things that you would do, right? And I think about that. I'm like, it's not like there's this super complex thing where it was just really hard for them to figure out and they couldn't figure it out, and so this was the kind of best they could do. Like it's not a case of that, right? Where they're like, it's like literally there's so many like easy things they could have done to fix demons and make them at least playable.
Mm.
And they didn't do any of those things. And yeah, so it totally missed the mark for me. Really disappointed. My last hope now for Chaos is fucking Death Guard. Like, how depressing is it that the only Psychic Awakening I have left is goddamn Death Guard? Like, I don't know. I'm like, because I was like, oh, the Thousand Suns one was good, and I
Mm.
think Thousand Suns and Chaos Space Marines were actually decent. Like, Chaos Space Marines was super good, not like game breaking good, but like probably one of the best and most like well rounded. It had so many different options. Thousand Suns, same thing. Like Thousand Suns got 9 different like cults. They got extra spells. They got extra warlord traits. They got stratagems. Like theirs looks like someone actually like sat down, invested time and energy into it.
Mm.
The demon one just feels like it was rushed, and it just feels like, okay, we got to put demons in somewhere. Like it does. Like, why are they even in the book called Engine War? Like that was
Well, I
like,
think I think I think the really interesting thing is, if you look at the parity just in of its own book, there's so much that the Mechanicum get in that book. You're just like, this is a lot of stuff, and it's like it's additional rules and additional rules. It's like, oh, actually, by the way, here's some additional stuff if you're playing Mars. Here's additional canticles, and you're like, oh my god, this is great. Also, here's some more stratagems, more units, and then demons. You're like, plague bearers can. Like, I read the plague bearer one. It might be one of the worst stratagems I've ever read. Like, I was like, what do you think's happening with the plague bearer? The other thing I was going to say was, is if you look at Grey Knights being really good as well.
oh, don't
Like,
even.
yeah, but I'm just.
Grey Knights literally went from one of the worst armies to one of the best armies in the course of their Psychic Awakening. So
Yes.
it is possible. It is possible to like, and Chaos went from like a really bad faction to solid. Thousand Suns went from like not great to good. Blood Angels, like all the Marine ones, obviously got, now that they have all the toys
Orcs got
from
better.
the main book. Everyone got like, and there's a few that didn't miss the mark, but I've played against Tyranid lists that have had some of that stuff in there, and it can be nasty. Um, but look, what they should have done, and I know GW hates you, so they're probably not listening. But if you are listening,
No, there's an intern. There's an intern that has to
yeah,
listen to every one of my shows. He has the worst
and
job.
I can't go back. They should have released. Look, there's what, 20 factions? Is
Mm,
that 20? You'd say 20 factions?
yeah.
They should have released 5 books, 4 factions per book, over like 4 months, 5 months, a short time, so that by essentially like January, all the books were out, and then we had a good 6 months of all the books, all the armies being on parity. I don't even know if all the Psychic Awakening books will be out before ninth edition. I think we could even, there's a possibility that things like Pariah and things like War of the Spider could drop after ninth edition. Like now, I don't think so. I think what we're going to see before ninth edition drops, I think we'll see the Cow Elves, and I think we'll probably see one more Psychic Awakening minimum. But like, because they're all quote unquote compatible for ninth, there's actually no reason that they need to drop the books before ninth edition. They could wait till after ninth edition drops and then drop the Psychic Awakening.
Yep.
But then it's going to be almost a year. It took them a year to release these supplements. Some of the supplements have like 2 books in them. So they should have put 4 factions per book, released all of them over like a very short time. And then within 5 months, we could have all been kind of seeing the whole picture. Everyone's Psychic Awakening's out. We're all playing on the same battlefield. But now it's basically going to be a year almost. I think the first, what was the first one? Uh, yeah, it doesn't even matter.
Was it
It was a long
Marines?
time ago. Like by the time I think it's out, it'll probably be like 10 months from start to finish.
Mm.
And it's like nine books, guys. Come on. Like Vigilus
Yeah,
was 2 books. End Times is 4 books. Nine
yeah,
books. What's the next one? 20 books.
and also
Like
if it
just
was
might as well
like
release codexes of this book.
also, if it was like to build up the hype and the story for the release of like the new narrative of this edition, like the narrative sucked. I've read 3 of them. Like it's been trying really hard. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to try, and then I've just noped out at this stage. And I know that that's not really like a rules thing, but
No.
if there was at least a vehicle for this story, like the End Times. Great example, like you talked about the story of the End Times, not the rules. Which the rules that they brought out for the End Times for 8th edition were bonkers. Like summoning and a billion casters. It was pretty funny. But yeah, no, I mirror your sentiment as well. It's very
Well,
odd, but it feels very odd as well. Like it was so much marine stuff, and it was just like everything at the end. Do some of the other stuff before that, and then put some more marine stuff out.
yeah, and like if you think about it, like I normally give GW codex stories a bit of mostly pass because they're it's not there to like it's not this isn't we're not reading Charles Dickens here like we're not expecting like super deep, but it's like okay, so the story is Ragnar and Ghazghkull fight. Ghazghkull dies, but then he doesn't, and then Ragnar dies, but then he doesn't, and then Abaddon fights Calgar and he kills him, but then he doesn't, and then Abaddon dies, but then he doesn't. It's like, okay, guys, come on, like, can we have like some sort of like consequences to these stories? Like, so in the end of the whole Psychic Awakening, we're back where we started, which is nowhere. So one of the things that I thought was so cool about End Times, Fall of Cadia, that whole like Gathering Storm, was that there's actual like things actually happened, and then like they didn't unhappen at the end. Like they didn't get undone at the end. It was like, oh, like a thing happened and it stuck. But like with Psychic Awakening, it's like, okay, so and so died, but then they didn't. It's like, okay, or like they got away. They that's like the classic like, I'll get you next time, and they like like they have at the last minute like it's like, okay, Abaddon could kill Calgar. All he has to do is like push his sword for another like 10 seconds and kill him, but instead he like has to take a phone call and go like and leave. It's like, dude, just like, that's like, hey, can you hold? All right, now I'm going. Like like it's
Uh,
not. Yeah, it's so annoying. So
I have a
yeah,
question. I have a question for you. Which is worse, the Psychic Awakening narrative or the last season of Game of Thrones? Twitch chat and Jim. What are you going for?
well, as long as we don't get some like guardsmen jump out of the bushes and like kill stab Magnus in the heart and like end the whole Psychic Awakening. I
Well,
think probably Game of Thrones will be worse, but
I want
I prefer
Celestine
past
to
one.
I want Celestine to burn all of Terra to the ground. That's what I want. That's my play. But
Yeah.
everyone thinks it's
Like
Game of Thrones.
I'm really hoping at the end of this
Mm.
Psychic Awakening and like into the ninth, I was like super excited. I was like, well, the storyline's gonna move. They're gonna release like just like when it did one from seventh to eighth, we had Fall of Cadia, like Gilliman came back, we had Mortarion come back, like Cadia fell. That was super cool. What's the first novel they release? Oh yeah, this is actually set 200 years before current timeline. What? Like, why do we care what happened in the Indominus Crusade, which was at the start of 8th edition, right?
Yes.
It's like I was like, why do we care? Like we're 200 years later. Like
It's,
what's my first 40K novel in the current timeline? Like tell me what's happening now. I don't care what happened 200 years ago. Like literally zero fucks.
I mean, I care what happened 10,000 years ago because that was interesting. But zero fucks about now. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's like whose idea was it to like and then it's really confusing because like Dark Imperium, which was the storyline of the current timeline,
Yeah.
there was 2 novels released, Dark Imperium 1, Dark Imperium 2, which was like Mortarion versus Gilliman basically in the current timeline and the Plague War. And now the first book out is actually 200 years before the first book out for 8th edition when that released. It's like, what? Like what do you like are you guys high? Like why are you writing this book? It's no one asked for it, no one wants it.
I'm going to tell you something after. I can't do it on here. Anyway, well, so Jim, Going forward, what are your plans right now? Because we're getting towards the end of the show. So, like, what are your plans right now for prepping for ninth? And just generally, how are you? What are you going to do over the next few months? I know that CCBB unfortunately has been cancelled,
Yeah.
but maybe teams will happen beginning of next year. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
You got any plans? What are you going to be up to?
So yeah, it's funny just on that note, like all these tournaments that I won last year have so I won a lot of my tournaments earlier, and then
Yeah.
I kind of was just kind of went off the deep end at the end. But so I'm like, so I guess so does that make me also the 2020 champ because I am basically the reigning champ from like the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm the next tournament I have quote unquote in my schedule is slash was Nova.
Yes.
That was I think they're making a final call next week. June 15th is supposed to be like they're like, hey, we're gonna make a final call whether it's happening or not. And that's in
Mm.
September. So the earliest I could see myself even playing a tournament is September. Actually yesterday I started going through my calendar and looking at okay, what events are still happening for the rest of the year? What's the rest of my year look like for events? To be honest, I like this has been fantastic from
Oh, okay.
my perspective. Like I've been painting, I've been like exercising, I haven't been drinking, I've been so healthy, like I feel fantastic like physically.
Yeah.
Um I don't feel like I have money because I'm not flying around everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Um Obviously I miss playing, but I've been really investing back into my hobby. I've been pinning up a Soul Drinkers army for 40K, um, and just finishing a lot of projects. My goal right now for the next like until ninth edition drops, I'm just trying to finish as much as I can. That is Pile of Shame, primed, uh, boxes still, so that going into ninth, I have basically a clean slate. And then depending on what is good, I can basically switch into Chaos or switch into Marines. If so, one of those two factions I'll play. So I'm going to continue kind of painting that stuff, just trying to build up my collections. And then for the rest of the year, yeah, like I think I will probably try to play in some events at the end of the year. But to be honest, like this is a bit of a lost year, and I'll
Mm.
probably just take it pretty easy this year. Like I'm not too like incentivized to go like, oh, okay, now I got to go try to like win the ITC in 4 months of like events. Because the thing is like, even if places are allowed to have events, the size of the events might be very limited. So like they could say, yeah, you can have Nova, but like you can't have more than 200 people in one space or more than 100 people in one space at once. No large events.
Mm.
So even though events that are going to happen could be very capacity limited, so and I played one event at the Canberra team tournament at the start of the year,
Yeah.
and that was that was literally the last game of 40K I played, and that was in February. That was the first week of February. It was the last game of 40K I played, and I'm playing actually a game against I don't know if you know the guys from Play on Tabletop. They do like
Yeah.
really like slick
Really,
streams.
really good
Yeah.
videos.
So I'm doing a stream with them on Monday. They're based out of Vancouver, like the
Mm.
Vancouver area. So I'm actually playing my first game against JT, who's the guy that narrates most of the videos,
Yeah.
on Monday.
He's a
And
great
we were
guy.
both, he's awesome. And we were messaging each other. I was like, dude, I just opened Battlescribe. I don't even know how to write a list anymore. Like, what's good? Like, tell me what to do. Like, we're both so out of like what's even like happening with like 40K that we're like, neither of us knew how to write lists. So yeah, so I think I'm just gonna take it easy, focus on my hobby. I have an Instagram account. I'm gonna plug it here. It's Jimbo V underscore paints. I put all my painting up there, all my projects, everything that I'm like working on. I just finished my I don't know if you guys have read the Soul Drinkers Omnibus, which is like from Ben Counter. It's like an old, but I just finished my Sarpedon, who's like the chapter master. So
Mm.
he's this like big spider-like dude. So my Space Marines are Soul Drinkers, so they're renegade, loyalist, Space Marines. If you can think about it, wrap your head around that. So yeah, so I'm just gonna continue painting. I don't think I'm gonna start any new armies. I think between Marines and Chaos, I like the thing about Marines is it's Imperium. So between Imperium and Chaos, I think I have at least one good army, like in my ownership. So I don't think I
Yes.
need to go and like run out and like buy a new army. Yeah, and I think I'm just gonna take it easy this year. I'll probably still do LVO. I was actually supposed to play for the WTC team for Canada, so I'm really disappointed I didn't get to do that. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that I I guess I'm still good next year and they pick me again because like but I don't
No
know
one,
if that's
no
gonna
one will
happen.
tell. Yeah, like
Yeah,
we were meant to be doing the coverage for the WTC,
yeah,
so we were super hype about that, and we'd done like the WTC guys who I've got to know a lot more this year are just phenomenal people, the organisers especially. So like we were like, as a group, like we were super hype about do that, and also I was meant to, I don't know if you were meant to be at CCBB. I was coming out there again
yeah,
to do that. That was going to be rad. So yeah, like it's interesting. I also feel like it's been a good time because I would like you was traveling around a lot over the past year, so it's been nice to maybe have a break. But that means that I'm just encouraged now for when things happen to get back to it. I'd also be interested, like you said, to actually look at how events manage to populate like the numbers and how many people they're going to be able to have, and also if people feel comfortable to go to those events in the right situations. So I think
yeah.
that's another one.
Like in Vancouver, anyways, like restaurants are allowed to open now at
Hmm.
50% capacity, but even they're not even filling at 50%. Like people are still not going out. So I just don't know like what it's going to be like. I think 40K gamers are generally like kind of like disease ridden anyway, so I don't think I think most of them will care that like they're going to like we're all kind of like pretty gross anyway, so I don't think blessed by Nurgle, so I don't think most of them will be that worried about it. But there's definitely lots of places like if you have family members or kids or anything like that, so anyone that's vulnerable in your family, you're not going to go play 40K, right? Like
Nope.
I don't know, depends on where you live, but it could be a case. And but yeah, so I'm right now I'm planning Nova, SoCal Open, which is I wish London GT was happening, or there's be something in the UK, so I have an excuse to come out there.
So it's meant to be being pushed to September October, is the current
Okay.
like scuttlebutt at the minute. There's a lot of stuff up in the air as per and because also based on different countries are dealing with it differently, right? Like some countries are like no, like you're not doing this, and some are like Sweden's opened up a little bit. So I think we're going to be in a very interesting transitional period, which I feel echoes your idea that this year might be a year to just chill, get like backlogs done, get stuff sorted for maybe the
I know
year
it doesn't
after.
look it because I always look good, but a lot of people have been saying, oh, there's like a quarantine 15, like you gain 15 pounds. I've actually lost 20 pounds since quarantine began. So I've been on like extremely healthy diet kick and like exercise and like working out. And I have another probably 15 to go until I'm like, feeling like my 20-year-old self. I'm turning 36 tomorrow. But probably another 10 to go before I'm feeling like I'm a 20-year-old again. But yeah, I'm like this is fantastic. Like I feel so good. I'm not hungover. Like it's awesome.
Good. All right. Well, Jim, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, and I'd love to have you back at
Um,
some point in the future. Maybe we could talk about when actually it all lands, how you feel about it all. I'll also
Absolutely.
include your Instagram and also your Twitter in the show notes.
Perfect.
So if
Thank
anyone
you.
wants to get in touch, do you want people to get in touch, chat to you about all sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, don't ask me rules questions or list questions. I'll just send you to Art of War or one of those other list coaching services. Like go harass Nick or something like that. Like, but if you want to talk hobby or if you want to like give me compliments, yeah, feel free to hit me up.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us live. It's been great seeing you all. Mr. Sneezy, Scrivo, Captain Andrew, thank you for the compliment. Rograx, love you. Azrak, thanks everyone for joining us live. You guys are great. If you're listening back to the podcast, please stay hydrated, just like Jim is doing. Get healthy, do some push-ups, go for a cycle, drink some water. And also thank you to everyone on the Honest Wargame Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. So thanks very, very much. See you guys tomorrow, which is fun for Stream Street, whatever day it is at this stage. Big love to everyone, and have a great... Oh, before we go, Jim, your opportunity to shout out someone else that you want to shout out. Anyone you want to do a big love shout out to?
Well, I guess I'll give Scrivo a shout out for somehow convincing me to get up at 4 a.m. to talk Warhammer. So yeah, you know what though, like I actually had a great time. I don't even know if I'm gonna go back to bed. I might just go like be a productive human and like do some things, but I will probably go back to bed to be honest.
Well, thank you for doing it. I appreciate it loads.
No worries.
Everyone look after yourselves and have a great day.